Good evening and welcome to Supporting Families. We're excited to be back after a little bit of a hiatus from the OCD conference, but we're excited to be here and it's August, so good topic of back to school and how anxieties can appear in the classroom and in classroom settings. Two great experts here tonight and we're really excited to talk to them. And if you're watching the stream now, share a comment, let us know where you're from or just say hi. We're happy to have you all across the U.S. I think in other parts of the world too. Either school is beginning, has begun, or will begin very soon. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time of year, and back to school shopping is in swing. So we're excited to delve into this topic tonight. Before we get started, and I introduce my guest, let me just read a couple of announcements so that we're all aware that this live stream is educational and not intended to replace therapy. So for treatment-related questions, please work with your provider, contact a clinician or someone that's local in your area. And you can use the IOCDF's online resource directory if you want, which is a great resource to find therapists in your area or even teletherapy. It goes iocdf.org/find-help. You can see it right there on the screen, and that can help you locate a trained clinician. Also, the IOCDF, the International OCD Foundation, is not a crisis hotline. So if you are in crisis or you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please call 988, which is a suicide and crisis lifeline, just by dialing 988 in the U.S. or I believe most of North America. And the website is 988lifeline.org. Or you can go to your local emergency room and dial 911 for emergency services immediately. We want to create a safe space and be kind and respectful to everyone. So please be courteous in the comments. Keep your comments or questions related to our topic. And also, as you can see, we're broadcasting on several social media platforms. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. So remember, this is being recorded. And we are excited and just want to thank Jack MHA for sponsorship of tonight's live stream. So let's get right into it. Excited to talk back to school. Both my children are now, as of yesterday, I have two college-age students, so a little older, but I'm excited and definitely went through issues as both of them were going to school with anxiety and just nerves and frustration. So let's get into it. I want to introduce Heather Yardley. Am I saying it correctly? All right, great.
Yeah,
and also Rebecca Roberts. So please take a second. Can you just introduce yourself to our environment? We got dogs and cats here. Mine are around my feet right now, and so they're welcome to join as well. Heather, I'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Heather Yardley. That was Scotch Bonnet making an appearance over here. I tried to keep him out, but he gets very excited about talking to people. I'm a pediatric psychologist at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I worked with kids who have anxiety disorders for a long time. I did some of my training at University of Florida, have done OCD treatment, general anxiety treatment. And I also work with kids and families who have chronic illnesses. So working on adherence and adjustment to that too. Very excited to be here.
Thanks. Welcome. Excited to chat with you for the next hour. I'll turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Great. Hey, everyone. I'm Rebecca Roberts. I'm a therapist in Chicago, Illinois. I work for AMK Counseling. I work with individuals, so all across the lifespan, dealing with anxiety, depression, OCD, BFRBs, and I also work with parents using the SPACE format. So we talk a lot about anxiety. We talk a lot about getting ready for school and dealing with situations where parents may not be in the same environment with their kiddos. I'm also a mother to 3 kiddos, so I have a freshman in high school, which is wild. I have a middle schooler and a kindergartner as well. So thanks for having me.
All the whole spectrum of elementary, middle, high. Okay, yeah, we got a lot
Everyone.
So you're also living it as we talk about it.
I am living it. Yes.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
so we generally talk about OCD if that's our focus, but I think tonight we can just expand it wide, because anxiety can show up in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to school, whether it's like performance and perfectionism and just wanting to make sure we're social anxiety. So we'll keep it wide, but also OCD related questions are also welcome. So let's start with just some general I guess maybe some suggestions for parents. How they might see anxiety show up in their kids? What might it look like? How might it manifest? From from kids just bringing it up to maybe behavior. So I'll kick it to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, sure. I feel like it can show up a variety of ways. When you're thinking about changes in behavior, sometimes you'll notice that maybe your kid is not wanting to go to school as much, or maybe they're getting upset about having to go and they're being a little bit more vocal about, like, can I just stay home? And it'll feel different from that usual, like, I don't want to go to school mentality that kids will often have, right? Sometimes there will be a change in their performance, how they're doing at school. So maybe the grades start slipping a little bit, or maybe they're not doing their homework as often as they should be doing. Or maybe you're noticing that you've gotten a couple of calls from the school saying that your kid has been tardy, or maybe they haven't been going to class. So sometimes we'll see signs there with them just kind of avoiding wanting to go to school or going to school altogether. Anxiety can show up a variety of ways, especially like in the body. So sometimes with kiddos, you'll notice like a lot of tummy aches or headaches, or even just the general things that we as adults will often see as anxiety, like sweaty hands, or feeling like keyed up, irritable, right? If you have a kiddo that is at an age where they are still talking to you and kind of sharing about their day, it's kind of like a blessing when they're wanting to share a lot. They may be vocal and just say like, hey, I'm nervous. I don't feel like I'm doing okay. Or sorry, there's an ambulance going by. I don't know if you can hear that. Or they may just say like, I feel sad when I have to go to school. I feel scared. I feel anxious, right? There are so many different things. And if you're feeling like what they are showing you, or the patterns that you're seeing are out of the ordinary of who your kid typically is, like how they typically present, I always say like, kind of go with that, pay attention to that. I don't want to ramble. I don't know, Heather, if you want to jump in.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's great context. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. Like, as you were talking, I was like, that's exactly what I think too, especially that last point about, you really know your kid best. And so you kind of get that feeling when something's off, and it's important to pay attention to that feeling.
What about specifically with OCD? How might parents of kids with OCD might see it manifest? I'll give you like an example. In our film Unstuck, an OCD kids movie, one of the kids, Jake, talks about how there was like a black and white checkered floor, and so he would have to like walk only on the certain colors of those tiles and repeat itself. So like the OCD showed up really in school, whereas my daughter was able to hold it together in school. And then when she came home, it was like, then we learned that the rocks that in science class were scaring her, or the topic, the book they read in English class was scaring her. And so her teachers had no idea this was happening, and it came in at school, whereas Jake in our film is like, it was apparent to everybody, and he was bullied and made fun of because of his compulsions in school. So how might OCD show up in school in different ways, Heather? And Scotch bonnet.
Scotch. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Scotch is barking, so I couldn't hear the end. So Rebecca, go ahead.
Sure,
yeah. Oh yeah, sure. I was just wondering, we're like, how might OCD specifically show up in school, or in a school setting?
Yeah. Sometimes you will see it in more of those obvious ways, right? Like if your kid is coming home and they are sharing, you're noticing patterns with the things that they're saying. Like there's a worry about this, there's a worry about that, there's more worries accumulating. Sometimes there will be rigid thinking, and you'll they'll get stuck on something, and it'll be very apparent for you as, you know, the person that's spending a lot of time with them. When I think about school, the first thing that comes to mind that I see a lot is perfectionism. So having maybe an unattainable goal or expectation of how they're supposed to present at school, or how they're supposed to achieve a certain, you know, task. Maybe that looks like them taking 3 hours to get a page of their schoolwork done because they have to do it right, or they have to do it over again. So a lot of times I'll get keyed in by the rigidity that's showing up. And the what I was talking about, the worry after worry after worry, sometimes like the jumping around from worry to worry can be an indicator for me.
Yeah. Heather, how about you? How have you found, maybe in some of your patients or the kids that you treat, you know, OCD showing up in school, or that OCD anxiety around school?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Rebecca gave like one of the classic examples that we see is that really taking a long time to do homework. And I think, you know, it's interesting because that's a sort of can be a subtle way that it starts to show up, because, you know, kids can be reinforced for being very careful with their homework. And so really trying to get a beat on, is this intense enough that it is becoming a problem or related to their OCD, or is it, you know, something else that's manifesting? A lot of the kids that we see, and I think probably everybody, is as fall starts and kids start getting sick, we see a lot more contamination concerns, you know, a lot more hand washing, talking about being sick, really being worried, and kind of going over what the recommendations are for keeping yourself healthy. So, you know, cleaning things that don't need to be cleaned, washing your hands, talking about being sick a lot. A lot of reassurance seeking, I think, is another key for parents and providers to like look for. Like, is the kid asking a lot? Is this okay? Is it safe? Am I sick? And even just from a regular anxiety perspective too, that's a, you know, a way that a lot of kids try to express that they're, you know, like Rebecca said earlier, not feeling great at school, or worried about something, or feeling uncomfortable, just those physical symptoms. And so a lot of our kids will start asking a lot. And then, you know, it can tip again into an OCD compulsion.
Yeah, that you both made a big distinction, because, you know, just in general with school or in life, there are things that are stressful for you. I'm sure, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I think with schools, okay, I have a test coming up, and so I get nervous and anxious about how am I going to do for the test. So I want to study, so there might be temporary or more temporary or situations where anxiety rears its head. But, you know, with OCD, you'll see something building, you'll see something continuous. What are some signs that a parent or caregiver should watch for to indicate that maybe the anxiety is getting worse or not improving?
I really tend to look for kind of what you were talking about, really that pattern. You know, is it episodic? Is it like something like a big test, an AP exam, that kind of stuff? Or is it continuing across multiple situations? And especially like, what is the intensity relative to the task or the situation? You know, is somebody feeling a little bit anxious because something big is happening, a performance, or is the anxiety or those feelings so big that they can't engage in it? So if they start avoiding things, or again, that intensity is just a lot, like you feel like your kids studied enough or prepared enough, but they're spending 3 or 4 or 6 hours doing something. You know, I tell families, if the kid starts to complain about it, like, it's bothering me, I feel like I can't stop. So they're like vocalizing that it feels more than they can handle. Like Rebecca said, if your kids are still talking to you, that's awesome, but they all hit an age where they stop talking. But if they start talking again, we got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I think we were lucky, I guess, in the sense that my daughter was very vocal. So we heard about all the issues, and reassurance was a big part of our lives. So a lot of it was, you know, the follow-up of, is this going to hurt me? This is going to hurt me? This is going to kill me? You know, is this going to injure me? Rebecca, how about you with some of, you know, the kids that you treat or have treated in the past, how can parents, what are signs parents can look for? Are there any things that a teacher might say, or the other signs maybe that might not be as physical, that a parent should look for to highlight maybe this is getting to be a more significant issue?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first, I loved everything that you were saying, Heather. Like, it definitely see that happening with kiddos. I'm typically looking at frequency, intensity. I think, Heather, you were touching on this, just the appraisal of the situation and how they're responding to it. Like, does it feel like an appropriate response to the fear or the trigger, right? I also look at how they usually cope with anxiety or discomfort, or just like any, situation that would make them, that would feel out of the ordinary. And if their ways of coping start to feel unhelpful, or it seems like what they're doing is contributing to the anxiety, I think that's a great time to bring someone in. Sometimes if, you're speaking with the teachers, they may notice that, the behavior has changed. And I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about how to have those conversations with the teachers and, the school, but overall functioning, are we noticing that maybe your kids functioning, whether that's like their social environment or their daily activities just to get through life, like sleeping, eating, hygiene, are those things being impacted? One thing that I'll also highlight is, because I work with so many parents, is this impacting the parents' functioning as well? Like, is this impacting how the family unit is, navigating the stressor? Yeah, I feel like I have a lot that I could say about that as well.
No, I mean, I guess that's yeah. I guess that's an important point to answer, is how much is what's going on with your child impacting your own life. That's a big signal in itself. So that can be a big. So I think when it comes to OCD specifically, or and how you might treat it, it can be a little dicey, because if the issue is happening in school or related to school, it can't always be something that you might do exposure therapy for. Actually, can we just take a minute and so if a parent is new, we can give them a little bit of like a 101 of like how OCD is treated, and then we can maybe just go into like how might ERP be practiced in school, or how might we work on something in or around school related issues. Heather, would you mind kind of giving that ERP 101 chat for parents, and then we can kind of go into maybe just some ideas or hypotheticals on how it might be practiced if there's certain anxieties that show up in school.
Yeah, for sure. So what I kind of start with parents and families talking about is exactly what you said, ERP, so exposure and response prevention. And I like to say, we're going to make a list of all of the things that are kind of stressful for you, and then we're going to do them. And families look at me like, that sounds terrible. But we know that it works. And so the idea is that we are gradually exposing someone to things that are a little bit stressful, so that they can build up the tolerance for it and be able to handle situations that we know are coming, or that they are maybe having a bigger reaction to than is typical. I try really hard to think about my language and say things that are kind of neutral, because everybody's OCD is a little bit different. And I assure them that we are going to start easy and get a little bit harder. But by the time we get to those harder things, they're going to be easier, because we're working on skills to help with it. So another key hallmark of ERP is that response prevention part. So thinking about the things that they are doing to make themselves feel better, which is how OCD gets in there, right? You are afraid of a thing and you do this other thing and it makes you feel better. So of course you're going to keep doing it because it works. But we know it tips into lots of other problems. So, learning skills to help cope with those situations that are stressful and causing anxiety. And then I like to tell my families that I'm never going to have them do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So I do a lot of modeling ahead of time. So when people are worried or they're like, nope, that's going to kill me, I'm like, all right, let's do it. So hopefully that helps as like a brief overview.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca, anything to add, or maybe can we talk about maybe the hypothetical situation? Maybe what might be some ERP that you've seen in schools and how, or issues that you've seen in schools and how you might have developed a kind of a plan around helping with ERP through that.
Yeah. I love that line. I will never have you do something that I wouldn't do myself. I say that with everyone as well, and I haven't gotten on a plane yet with anyone. That's my only thing. But yeah, with kiddos and with their parents, I go through that explanation of ERP. I tend to use a chart showing like the feedback loop of just how a trigger might, cause some kind of anxiety spike or some kind of, in the case for OCD, like some particular reaction to a thought. And then we have this thing that is meant to make us feel better. And whether that's a compulsion or that's avoidance or, some kind of behavior. And then, as we kind of like follow this cycle of either not going to school or taking a really long time to do the homework or avoiding something, we're reinforcing this idea that whatever that trigger was scary in the first place and that we need to keep avoiding it. And so when I think about ERP and I think about incorporating like all of the things that are scary, there's Kat, all of the things
I told you he'd be here.
They're there. When we want to incorporate all of the things that make us feel uncomfortable, if we have those all laid out, let's say your kid is having a hard time completing homework because of this idea that they need to be perfect, then maybe we take a gradual approach to just trying a couple of things that would make us feel slightly uncomfortable or take us out of that comfort zone. So an example of that would be if I have a kiddo who they did their homework, now they have to erase it and redo it because something wasn't right. Maybe we notice that they've on an average will do that like 4 or 5 times. My homework for them would be, we're going to erase it twice and then be done. Or I would say, hey, you know what? You've got 60 seconds to write a paragraph for whatever this homework assignment is. And then whatever you write, you're going to turn it in. And that's going to be it. We don't get to revise. And so like putting them in situations where they're manageable tasks, right? They're things that they can do in school. They're things that, we could collaborate with the school and the teachers with. But we want to show them that they have tools and they also have support.
Talking about working with, it's a great segue into talking about how you involve schools. So let's get to that. I wanted to just share an example. So one of, being able to start where you can only, erase things twice, I feel like is huge. And that's great. I know that I've heard one example where the first thing that a kid had to do was literally like take an E and write it slightly below the line so it wasn't even with the ruled paper line, and that's all one E on one page of writing, and that's where they started, and that caused a lot of anxiety, but that's what was able to do. So sometimes it can be that small. You're just going to take one letter and mess it up, or you're just going to do one grammatical mistake, and that's it, and that's fine. So you can be, and I think to what Heather and Rebecca were talking about earlier, sometimes you're creating this kind of a list of things that bother you, and then you're kind of working through that based on a hierarchy of what might cause more anxiety. And the scariest thing you might have to do is like write something without editing it, and if that's the scariest thing, that's the thing you don't start with, that's the thing you work up to doing. But let's talk, because some things do happen in school. You do have to involve sometimes a teacher, talk with a teacher. I know that the site Anxiety in the Classroom that the IOCDF has, maybe we can throw that website on the screen, has sections for students, parents, and administrators. But how can a parent go about involving or even starting the conversation with the teacher or the school administration? Have either of you gone into schools with parents? How do you coach your families to do that? Because this is definitely a way where a parent can really show advocacy. Heather.
Yeah. In my current role, I have a little less flexibility to actually go to schools. In my previous jobs, I've had that flexibility, but I don't have that so much anymore. So what I do instead is try to provide a lot of documentation for families. Like I write a lot of letters kind of explaining things and giving families like as much backup and support as they feel like they want for going into schools. One thing I tell all of the kids that I work with, no matter what, is, your mental health is nothing to ever be ashamed of or like needing to hide, and it's nobody's business. So like helping them find the words and what they're comfortable with sharing too is really important. I think what do they want them to know? And then if I need to, I'll jump on a call with school or teachers in particular, especially if there's one, like you mentioned, the rocks in science, like sometimes there's like a trigger class that's kind of the worst. So trying to work with that. I encourage parents to, know what their resources are and what they have available to them. So I encourage them if they need like a 504 plan, which is a plan to, make accommodations in the school setting to make it easier for their kids, and kids with OCD and anxiety qualify for a 504 plan. Schools are better or worse depending on the school at like helping. So I try to give them as much resources as we can. I point to the IOCDF website and other links that they can go to. So making sure they have the information and then being available to answer any questions that the school might have. I've had some teachers who are parents, and that's been really helpful because like doing some contamination related exposures and stuff, being able to get into the school over the summer and sort of practice things before kids are around has been really helpful.
That's sorry, I want to turn over to Rebecca, but that's like can be a really good tip. If school hasn't started yet or school started, if you're able to kind of get into school after hours, before hours, when nobody's there, when maybe it's a little less anxiety-ful, but where your child isn't maybe as self-conscious of those around it, it can be a good way that they can either practice things or just get used to the setting. I can share kind of the strategy that we use with our kids, but Rebecca, I'd love to hear like how you would suggest parents. I know you mentioned being involved in the space program. How would you get suggest parents kind of get involved, get the school involved, or incorporate the school, or in awareness of what's going on and how they might be able to help?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I always tell people is don't wait until the wheels are falling off. Don't wait until your kids miss 3 weeks of school, or they've come home early every day with a tummy ache, and we're trying to do damage control, right? If you are noticing something and it just feels off, like shoot your teacher an email or ask for a meeting and just come in, and sometimes I'll walk parents through what that conversation can look like. I'm like, hey, I'm noticing that my kid is experiencing some changes. I was hoping to get some feedback from you since you're in the classroom with them. Could we set up a meeting to just talk about like a future plan, right? As a mother, my middle schooler is a kid with a 504. That's exactly what I did. I went in, I said, hey, I think I'm noticing some changes. I think maybe we could have a discussion about possibly getting some accommodations. Your school will walk you through, like Heather was saying, your school will walk you through what the steps are, because, if you request a 504 or an IEP, they are required to determine your eligibility for that. But if that's not the route that you need to go, the first step is like just speaking with your teacher. Y'all are a team, and you want to make sure that like you are the expert with your kid, obviously, because you're their parent, but they see your kid for 7-8 hours a day. And so they are seeing things that you may not see. And so it's helpful to get everybody together.
It's great that you just kind of teed up what I was going to say, which is like, you want your teacher to be your eyes and ears in any way. So like, for us as our family, we would write a letter. When my daughter was young, we would write a letter, or she would sometimes write the letter to the teacher, hand it to her to open the discussion. Like, this is what, this is my condition. I have OCD. This is what happens. Sometimes in school it appears like this. And the reason for that was to kind of open the conversation at the beginning of the school year, but also allow my daughter to kind of create a hand signal or some kind of signal that she could have with the teacher. If her anxiety was high, she used to do this thing where she'd like put a thumb on her head, and the teacher saw that, then the teacher would excuse Vanessa from the class, where she could go out and collect herself and then come back in, or if it was really bad, go to see the vice principal. And that's kind of how we established it. We kind of opened the school year with this letter, not necessarily on the first day, but during the first week. Then when we would make time to go in and talk to the teacher, and what we were looking for was not necessarily asking the teacher to do the exposure therapy. There's a lot the teachers have to do during the day, but just be our eyes and ears and let us know if something was happening. So, and where that was really helpful was a unit would come up. They were studying World War II, and they were going to show a film and talk about the Holocaust, which was very scary to my daughter. Okay, they let us know that this was coming. We could talk about it at home. We could watch the film ourselves in a more of a safe space, so that, it just allowed us to understand when things were coming up that could be a trigger, and that, getting that partnership was really helpful. Like I said, for us, it wasn't that the teacher was expected to do the therapy or do an exposure, but just be kind of our eyes and ears and aware, and send us an email. Hey, this happened, or Vanessa brought up this, or she's doing this thing, I noticed it. And that would kind of allow us to see what was going on. And to your point earlier, Heather mentioned like siblings. One way siblings sometimes are involved in schools, if OCD is really bad, the teacher or an administrator might get the sibling involved to help, which is really not something that a sibling should be doing. So that's also, if you have siblings in the same school, you might want to make that aware that to the school. Listen, kid A should not be involved in anything that's happening, with kid B. And that can be some advice to help your siblings. You were both kind of talking about the accommodations and IEPs. What were say a kid isn't, the issues aren't necessarily popping up in school but coming out at home. What might be something strategies parents might be able to cope with if their kid kind of is holding it inside and coming home and it's all coming out at home? Rebecca.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's such a great question, because I run into that a lot, right? Where, kids have been holding it together the whole day, and then they come home and it just let it out. And I think there are some models that support this idea that like that's your kid's safe space. And so like they are coming home and they're decompressing, and this is how they do it. There are some other models that say like, yes, let them decompress, and let's make sure that we still have some accountability. There's a very loud motorcycle outside. Some accountability and responsibilities to manage their discomfort. So just as I would hope that like there are some opportunities for them to learn coping and regulation at school, I would want like the home environment to look like that as well. So making sure that you're normalizing and talking about feelings, and allowing for there to be space if there's something that they want to talk about. I always think it's helpful to have an area in the home where maybe that's like your regulation corner, or that's a place that they can go where if they need to like decompress, they need to chill out for a second, they need like just a little bit of space, they can have that. A lot of my younger kiddos will have like a coping skills toolbox that we will build, where it has something for every sense, like something that they can hold, like a squishy or a stuffy or a fidget, something they can smell that's going to help kind of like calm them down, or maybe they have a book that they can listen to. Some area that feels like it's their own space. You were talking about your daughter and having that hand signal in class, and that was just making me really like happy, because that was such an empowering moment. And I think kids need to be able to take a little bit of that like power back, because when you have anxiety, you can feel so powerless, and you feel like there's something that has a hold on you. So and I know I'm rambling, but like getting back to the home environment,
it's all super helpful.
Just having a space of,
I love the idea of like the safe space or the safe corner, the safe area, and then having a toolbox of things, whether it's, they have in that area to help them regulate, or maybe it's something you could even bring in school to help as well.
Right, right. And that's something that, if you are speaking with the teacher and coming up with some plans and, things like that, they can allow for like maybe fidgets to be in the class, or, whatever is going to be suitable for that environment. One thing that I will typically do with kiddos and then with parents is have a temperature chart of like the mood, so that they are able to understand what feelings they are having in the moment and communicate those. So if you have a chart on a wall, I'm a big like visual person. If you have a chart on a wall and it's got like 10 smiley faces, or it has like a temperature or a thermometer from like 0 to 10, and that's like 0 would be super chill and 10 is like I'm losing it, where are they? Can we do check-ins with them? We want our kids to be able to identify what's going on inside of them. And if they don't have the words for that, that's okay. But like, we have charts, we have, different ways to communicate that with them.
Yeah, and you can do that in the moment at home. Point to the area, point to the thermometer, and tell me how where you're feeling. This, you're down here, you're up here, you red. Yeah.
Right. And when the parents are doing that as well, I feel like I give parents a lot of homework. So I will often ask them to do the same things that they are, that their kiddos are doing, because we want to model that, like, this is how we learn about our bodies. This is how we learn about, what's going on with us. And it's helpful because parents realize, oh, I was like really escalated today, and this was a trigger for me, So yeah, just a couple of ideas.
Yeah, the modeling of behavior doesn't necessarily just talk about like going through the exposure therapy, but how am I feeling and how was I able to regulate myself? We talk to my kids now about this, but like when there was a big anxiety trigger, or there was a panic attack, and the kids were younger, if I had a bad day, sometimes I would say to my wife, you tag in, it's your turn, and vice versa. And that was like, now we say to them, do you realize that was our way to regulate, because we just couldn't handle, and we were lucky enough to do that. Heather, I would love to chat, like we were talking about schools, parents, how to handle it at home. What's the role of a school counselor, or maybe a school psychiatrist or psychologist involved in the mental health treatment? Is there an expectation that they should get involved, or how would a parent kind of involve that person in treatment?
That's a really great question. And certainly if there is someone available at school who can be that additional support, I would love to involve them. So if there's someone in the school that's like dedicated to that, I think that's great. Just like you mentioned with your daughter and the hand signal, I love that too. I encourage my patients to like indicate some way that they're doing okay. Yeah. So that person could be the guidance counselor, or, a school psychologist could be the person where if they need a break, if your kid needs a break, they can go there and they can have exactly what Rebecca was talking about. Super validating to hear all of her ideas, because they're similar to the ones I use. So I'm like, oh, I must be doing good because she's doing them too. But having that toolkit there, or some time to like take a break, or, just someone who's kind of aware of like, what are those coping skills? What makes somebody feel a little bit better? How can they decompress in that moment so that they can go back to class? Because we want our kids to stay in school as much as they can and have all of those experiences. Not just the learning, but like the fun stuff too. So if there is a school counselor, if they could just be there to support them and reinforce those skills, that's great. The other thing that I have relied on them for is for treatment sessions. Like sometimes for my kids who are in like middle or high school, they can go to the guidance counselor's office and do a virtual visit. So sometimes we'll schedule appointments during school, and parents can join the virtual visit from work or home, wherever they are, and the kid can do that. And then that way they're cutting down on the amount of time that they're actually missing. So sometimes that's another way to involve the school counselor or school psychologist.
I didn't even think of that, kind of using the room as a way, and also, potentially you're in the environment, so you as a therapist are able to kind of like see the anxiety where it happens. Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, you teed up something, Rebecca. Okay, so something that happens a lot is, and I think we touched on it very early on with how we might see anxiety, is school refusal. I don't want to go. I don't want to get up. I refuse. I throw a tantrum. So how can parents deal with that refusal to go to school? And what are some, I don't know, some tips or tricks that you might have to kind of help manage that situation?
No, that's such a great question. So one, I think it's important to validate that feeling, right, of not wanting to go, validate that, and hold the responsibility or the accountability and this expectation that like school is what you do at this age. Like there is still the expectation that you will go. So much like Heather was saying, like maybe we can make that gradual, but in the meantime, we don't want to reinforce or reward anything that might be attributed to that avoidance. So the first thing that I tell families when they are dealing with school refusal, if their kiddo is at home, whatever they would have been doing at school during those hours, the home environment is going to look similar to that. So if they don't have an iPad at school at 10 o'clock in the morning, they don't have an iPad at home. So we remove things that are going to reinforce this idea that, staying home actually feels a lot better than going to school. That can be really, really difficult. And so like, I'll spend a lot of time talking with the parents, like, how are we going to, as the parents, going to deal with the backlash or the discomfort that this is going to cause, right? That can be a little bit tricky, but I always say like it's going to be difficult in the beginning, but it's going to get easier because you are reinforcing this. You're following through with the things that you're saying, and you're still supporting your kiddo. If you have put in place a gradual plan for them to return, it's not like you're leaving them high and dry and they're just at home. There's this idea that like we're going to work together to get back to the thing that you should be doing.
I love that. Just trying to mimic the environment things that you wouldn't be doing at school, you can't be doing at home. And so maybe there is, you're just, okay, you're not going to go to school. And here's your task for the day is whatever is in the school bag. And that's what you're able to do. Yeah.
And that's such a great way to kind of like lead into that gradual return. If they have homework that they would have been doing, in class, or if the teacher is able to give them, something to take home, that time spent at home is great to get the work done. That time is great. It's a great time to work on your coping skills, right? It's a great time to meet with your therapist. There are a lot of things that you can be doing in, those hours that would have been school time hours. And hopefully if you're taking that gradual approach, then maybe like instead of 7 hours at home, maybe you're spending 6 hours at home and then driving to the school at the end of the day, right? Or you're working your way back up to getting there. My focus with that tends to be how the parents are going to respond, because sometimes we take it a little bit harder than the kiddo that's actually dealing with the anxiety.
I guess in a lot we talked about modeling a few times. This is one of those things, like, you are the parent, you have to model that behavior, as uncomfortable as it might make your kids. You are still, there's that parent-child relationship, and sometimes it is delivering the news that might make a child upset, but the overall goal is improve mental health or get back to school, and there are certain things you're going to have to do to kind of help that to happen. We've talked a lot about like parents, kids in school. One of the great things about the Anxiety in the Classroom site is that there is sections for schools and administrators. And so I want to see, the time that we have left, talk a bit about, switching to the teacher side. So what might, if, for the teachers out there or the administrators out there, how might, what signs might they watch for? How do they bring it up? Realizing that they could be looking after, 10 to 20 to 30 kids in their classroom. What are some suggestions you have for teachers and how they might be able to kind of notice things for kids in the classroom? Heather, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think any grown up in a kid's life has a little bit of a responsibility to pay attention to that kind of stuff. And you're right. When you have in your family, you have fewer kids to pay attention to. When you're a teacher or an administrator, you have a lot of kids to pay attention to. So I think, trying to normalize as much as possible, just talking about feelings and being open about them, even starting a class with like, how's everybody doing today? Just a few minutes of that, like education and expressing of emotions is great. I think it's always okay for adults to, like Rebecca was saying, model their own feelings. So if a teacher is having a bad day, just saying like, well, it's a really tough day today, but we're going to keep going and work through it. I think if a teacher notices that someone is having a hard time, trying to talk to them privately in a separate situation, in a very, calm and nurturing environment. Just, I noticed that you're, maybe it was taking you a little bit longer with your homework. Can I help you? Being just, very gentle when bringing it up is really helpful. Anxiety, I think, can be really hard sometimes in a big setting for people to see. Like if a kid is really, especially in their head with their anxiety, they're not doing obvious things, they might get overlooked. Because if they're just worrying and they're sitting there and they're suffering through the day, it might be hard to catch. But if we normalize that, just like talking about our feelings, sometimes that can help and really being in tune. I think teachers, if they have time, and this is a big, big if, Scotch is disagreeing with me, they could, try to, his sister's in the room now, try to check in with all of the kids in the class, maybe trying to incorporate some check-ins into like homework or other things like prompts or journal type things, just to kind of get a beat on how everybody is doing. I think at a larger scale, the administration, same thing, just kind of making it a priority to talk about it for a few minutes and destigmatize, feelings as much as possible. Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. This is Dottie Boots who's joined now.
No, I think it's really good advice for teachers, especially about like, trying to handle it in a more of a quieter situation rather than calling a student out publicly. I think one of the things that we often hear from parents is about, teachers rewarding behaviors like perfectionism or, highlighting like, why can't everybody do homework like, Johnny here, when not realizing that is like a traumatic thing for that child because it's driving them, the OCD triggers at night. So sometimes, a teacher might need to kind of reform their behavior. Rebecca, any things that you've seen? Have you ever talked to, like when you talk to parents? So by the way, I wanted to share, there was a comment about what our panel, what our panel's credentials are. Both Heather and Rebecca are licensed therapists. They treat OCD and anxiety, both kids and kids of all ages. So experts here to talk about anxiety in the classroom and back to school. So if you missed the opening, that's why these fantastic guests are with us tonight. So, Rebecca, anything for teachers, administrators, folks who are in the schools every day that they can look out for, or things you would suggest, they can, ways they might be able to help individual kids?
Yes, and I swear every time you ask me a question, there's an ambulance that goes by, so I apologize.
It helps me feel like New York City too, so I like
right.
Chicago, New York, similar.
It's wonderful. One thing that I think it's really important to emphasize, and I know teachers know this, but with everything that they are managing, like Heather said, with all of the kids that they have and the responsibilities of being a teacher, we're not ever asking them to diagnose, right? We are simply, saying like, you are with these kiddos for an extended period of time. So it is really important that as the teachers, the administrators, that we are establishing trust and safety from the start, right? Like Heather said, normalizing things, normalizing emotions and talking about that. if you are noticing a change, maybe sometimes like kids are blanking out, or they're, not turning in their homework, or maybe they're not talking with their peers, like those are things that do become noticeable in the class as you get to know the kids. And I think this goes back to what we were saying about parents starting conversations with teachers. Teachers can have those conversations with parents as well, and remind everybody that we're all on the same team. We're all, we all have the same goal of making sure that this kid is feeling successful, and, is getting their needs met. I think we're at an age, thankfully, where we are recognizing more that not everybody learns at that same blanket, sit down, be quiet, stare at the blackboard kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And that there are going to be different ways that kids learn best, right? And to your point of having a quiet kid who sits and does their homework doesn't necessarily mean that they are a good kid or that they are a good student. It could mean that they are struggling inside, and we haven't gotten to that point with them yet. So one thing that I would love to see this happen everywhere, but when we have our check-ins with parents, when it's parent-teacher night, when it's curriculum night, when it's any kind of interaction, rather than solely focusing on academics, can we incorporate more of the discussion about how they're managing, like hanging out with peers in the classroom, how they are, maneuvering other things besides the grade in that class. If there could be like a little SEL tab on their report card and just like have little comments, that would be awesome. But just reminding, teachers, administrators, anybody that's working in the school and interacting with the kids, that these are relationships that we're forming with them. And so, we will have a sense of responsibility, and we will see changes in them sometimes. So, we're all a team. I know that was kind of rambly, but
no, I think it's good. It's a good point about like parent-teacher conferences, or anytime you have, as a parent, you're able to get into the school. You can also you don't always have to talk to the head teacher. You can talk to the gym teacher, the science teacher, people who are also with your kids, and see them periodically because they might notice things. I would just say for teachers, you don't always have to. If you might not be comfortable reaching out to the parents, that's where the administrators, the school support staff, your principals, your deans, even if you have a school therapist or psychologist, can help not only make those introductions or handle those introductions, or also coach you on how to do that. So there are ways, because of teachers are fantastic at teaching our kids, and also recognize things that might be wrong. So it can be great as advocates and communicators with parents. What are some I don't know. This is a tough question, but I always wonder about this with teachers. And I alluded to this a little earlier. A teacher has a lot of kids they're looking into how would a teacher make sure they're trying to balance the overall goals and job that they do, teaching the kids, versus kind of maybe over-indexing on one or two kids that might need the extra help. Any strategies or ideas for teachers to kind of create that balance, so they're teaching but also being aware and helping. Heather.
I forgot to mention this before. The Kids Mental Health Foundation has some good resources for just general teachers. You can get like a classroom kit for talking about mental health generally, and they're free, and they send them out to everybody. So that's great. But I think, to your specific question, doing any of this helps normalize it for all the kids in the classroom. So thinking about, like, you don't have to necessarily target one kid when you're talking about mental health stuff. It's about to be a brawl next to me, so sorry if they start barking. But that it's helpful for all kids to be able to do that, and really thinking about, if a teacher feels like one kid in particular is demanding a lot more attention or care. I'm really sorry if you hear the grumbling. That's a signal too to, involve parents and say, hey, I'm noticing that this is ramping up. We're needing a lot of attention. Maybe it's time to seek a therapist outside of what we're doing here, if they haven't already, or involve them. So really being aware of that too. What are the other resources that can help? And again, I think private conversations with the kid, maybe thinking about where they're sitting in the classroom, if they need some extra time or need to be away from, scrutinizing eyes, that might help reduce the amount of time that a teacher is spending with one particular kid. Working with the school administration about other things that we can do for those kids. So if you have one or two kids who are really taking a lot of time and effort, that's a really good thing to hopefully bring up to your administration and say, hey, I need some additional help, or can we, be creative in how we're helping these kids so that I can get done what I need to get done in the classroom. Because you're right, they're responsible for 30 kids. And on the flip side, I always encourage my parents when I'm working with them to not worry too much about the other 30 kids, to worry about their kids. So it is a delicate balance of how do we make the most impact for all the kids in the classroom.
Not easy, but your tips both help. Okay, I want to with my kind of last question here, slightly different focus to end it, but this is more talking about like a targeted area. But so how can parents help address specific issues such as test anxiety or social situations, or like a performance pressure specifically related to school? I'll toss it to Rebecca, and then Heather, you can add too.
Yeah. So one, I would definitely want to know a little bit more information about like what it is, what is happening when we have that anxiety. Like, are they feeling as if they are going to fail? Are they feeling as if they can't get started? I would probe a little bit more as a parent and see how much information I can get. Some of the things as a therapist that I kind of fall back on are exercises that help us practice those things. So if there's a kiddo that is dealing with social anxiety, I would love to practice being in social environments, because I'm thinking about the practicality of them growing up and being an adult that's going to be in situations where they have to interact with other people. And so anything that I'm having someone practice or, do in session is going to be like, is this contributing to their functionality and their ability to like get through the school day or get through whatever the situation is? So thinking about social situations, I would think about social situations that make them feel anxious and see if maybe there are little pieces of that we can practice, whether that is going to the coffee shop and asking for, I'm assuming kids wouldn't be drinking coffee, but going to the store and asking a question, right? Sometimes I'll work with people that have like high schoolers and young adult, like college students who have difficulty making phone calls, and we'll practice things like that, or we'll role play, right? Until we're ready to be in the situation and got the real life example. With test anxiety or performance anxiety, maybe they have a speech that they have to give in class. We'll prep for it. We'll do some guided imagery of like, okay, let's imagine that we're sitting in the classroom right now. Like, who all is there? Let's imagine that you're walking up to the front of the classroom. Let's imagine that the test is about to start. I'm a big fan of like deep breathing, and sometimes I'll get kids that are like, breathing doesn't work for me. My own son has said that breathing doesn't work for me, but checking with those body scans, using any of those coping skills that we may have talked about before, the ones that work best for them, seeing if that can be something that can help facilitate them through their own relaxation and preparation for a test. Those are the ones that are coming to mind. I don't know if Heather, if you have a
no. I remember. It's funny you talking. I remember being told like look at the tops, like when you're presenting, look at people's foreheads, don't look at their eyes, like as so you're kind of looking. But that was like so you're looking at the audience, but you don't have to worry about like looking at people's faces, which also helped me concentrate. So I mean a lot of that it just helps with those situational issues. Heather.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Rebecca said. Like when I work with my kids on those things, I really try to be very practical. Like she was saying, what is as close approximation as we can to the situation you're going to be in so that you can practice the skills that you have. I also like deep breathing a lot. I also try to do like progressive muscle relaxation and think about like different areas of the body to be able to tense. I share with kids, like I feel my anxiety in my body. And so like, I try to like give them models for things that I do. And really, you know, that repetition is so important. I also work in a really large department, so I can pull in Confederates and have kids practice with other adults, which sometimes is less anxiety provoking. Sometimes it's more. So just depending on what they feel like is good for them. Depending on like how significant it is, maybe even thinking about like working with school or whatever to modify the situation as much as we can. Can we reduce, if it's a performance or like giving a speech, can we reduce the number of people until they like build up their tolerance for it? Can they record, video tape themselves and have the teacher watch it later? But like Rebecca said, I really want to make sure that all of the treatment I'm doing is moving them towards something that they are going to have to do in life. Like we end up having to talk to people. We have to make phone calls. We have to ask questions. So what can we do that gets them closer and closer to that in the way that they feel comfortable and implementing the skills they have to make them as successful as they can be?
Kind of a good way to wrap it up, right? It's part of school is learning, and it's learning to get ready for the rest of your life. So, good tips as far as those situational areas. Heather, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me this last hour, talking about back to school, talking about anxiety in the classroom, sharing the resources. If we can put up the child mental health, was it childmentalhealth.org that you were
Kids
talking
Mental
about,
Health Foundation.org. Yeah.
Kids Mental. Yeah, let's throw that up like one more time, and you can get. Would you say parents can order a pamphlet?
Yeah, the toolkit. They have some really great conversation starters too that are great for kids. They're cards that you fill out, and then we have teacher resources. And Dottie's a fan.
Oh, great, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. And I also want to thank Jack MHA for their support and sponsorship. You can learn more about Jack MHA at jackmha.org. It's a great foundation. And also the IOCDF is donor supported. So if you found this valuable or some of the other live streams that the IOCDF runs, anything you can donate would be appreciated. iocdf.org/donate. And also, last but not least, we're talking back to school. So if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a student, anxietyintheclassroom.org can be a great resource with lots of different tips, tools, articles, and things to practice. Or you can share those resources with your friends, teachers, and students. We'll have a great topic next month. Thank you both for joining me. And you all have a great night or a day or wherever you are in the world. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks.